Hello and welcome, comic lovers and comic novices alike, to another Grudge Match Lightning Round. Grudge Match is all about hypothesizing fights between our favorite characters from fandom, and the Lightning Round is for those often requested matchups that, for one reason or another, aren't suitable for a full matchup. Today we're going to blitz our way through 3 popular proposed slugfests, and we're going to jump right into the first one right now, a very often proposed fight between 2 of the best tech heroes around, and that's from Marvel Iron Man versus DC's Steel. Iron Man Tony Stark came about first by a wide margin, created back in 1963, and has established himself as the premier tech hero of any comic industry. Steel, John Henry Irons, created in 1993 in the wake of the death of Superman as one of the 4 contenders for the sort of crown of the new Man of Steel. John Henry Irons has a lot of similarities to Tony Stark in terms of both being genius inventors who created the technology of their suits and used it to become powered superheroes and hang out with the big boys of the superhero universes. However, while these 2 characters do have quite a bit in common, the disparity in the power levels between their armors and the level of tech that they bring into the fight just cannot be ignored. The fact of the matter is, Iron Man's tech and weaponry is vastly superior to that of John Henry Irons. Iron Man's primary weaponry is repulsor-based, is his own design, energy-based weaponry that is constantly regenerating its own power and is very, very powerful in terms of attacking ability. And Steel doesn't have anything close to that kind of power in his own suit. His primary means of attack are a rivet gun, which would essentially just bounce off of Iron Man's armor, and a kinetic hammer, which makes for a decent melee weapon, but it's not going to be that reliable in a fight at long range, which is the kind of thing Iron Man primarily deals in. Additionally, Iron Man's suit has full-on force fields to it. The suit itself is very powerful, can stand up to all kinds of damage, but he also has incorporated force fields to make it even more resilient. Steel doesn't have force fields in his own suit, it's just the durability of the armor he's working with. Additionally, Iron Man has the Extremis armor, which is connected directly into his brain, so he can control all the aspects of his armor at will as an extension of his own body, something else Steel doesn't have the ability to do. So, in all ways, Iron Man's armor is just going to trump Steel's. He's going to be a bit stronger, he's going to be much faster using his repulsor jet engines as opposed to regular jet engines for Steel. His repulsor blasts are going to be more powerful than a rivet gun or the kinetic hammer, and just in all ways that their fighting skills can be measured, Iron Man is going to take the win of this particular grudge match. Moving along to our next match in this lightning round grudge match is the often requested matchup of 2 of the most famous vampire hunters ever put to comics. It's Marvel Comics' Blade versus, out of the mind of Joss Whedon, Buffy Summers from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Blade, Eric Brooks created in 1973, has been the premier comic book vampire hunter of the Marvel Universe ever since. The half-vampire, half-human hybrid who has all the powers of a vampire, none of the drawbacks. Great fighter, great weapons proficiency. Versus Buffy Summers from originally the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then later into the TV series and ultimately the comic book series of the same name, created in 1993. The chosen Slayer, who has, much like Blade does, superhuman strength, speed, and reflexes that allow her to fight vampires on their own terms. So in terms of physical skills and even in terms of fighting training, these 2 would be on equal footing. Unfortunately, quite simply, Blade, who has a penchant for using small firearms in his hunting of vampires, has guns at his disposal, and he would quite simply shoot Buffy. And we've seen, especially during the TV series, that Buffy is as susceptible to gunfire as any normal human is. In the Season 6 episode Seeing Red, the villainous character Warren Mears used a handgun, showed up to Buffy's house, and just shot her. And that regular bullet from a regular gun almost killed Buffy. So one simple bullet fired from one simple gun is all it would really take to take Buffy down, and Blade uses guns quite well, quite often. So if this was just to go down to a hand-to-hand matchup, it would be fairly evenly matched and much more close, but since characters in grudge matches get to use the weapons that they would generally use in a normal fight, Blade always has a gun on him, uses them all the time, would very simply shoot Buffy and put her down that way. And the last match in this Grudge Match Lightning Round Spectacular is comparing two of the primary fire-based characters of Marvel and DC Comics. It's from the Fantastic Four and Marvel Human Torch versus from DC Comics Firestorm. Human Torch created first in 1961, not actually the first Human Torch of Marvel Comics. That would be Jim Hammond of the Invaders, but the most popular and well-known character to use the name Human Torch, Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four, has the ability to have his body burst into flames. This allows him to fly, have fire control, fire projection, and it is very, very powerful and skilled at using those fire controls. Firestorm, created in 1978, is actually the fusion of two different characters who were fused together in a science experiment gone wrong. It's Ronnie Raymond and Martin Stein, who ended up smashed together into the same body and imbued with the powers of a Firestorm matrix. This gave him the ability to fly and fire control, but in addition to that, he also has radiation control, and his primary ability is molecular rearrangement of inorganic matter. Quite simply, he can take anything that is not alive and can change its molecular structure to anything else he wants. So he can turn walls into glass, he can turn entire buildings into water, he can turn anything that's not alive into anything else that's not alive. Not only its basic molecular structure, but he can also shape things any way he wants to as well. In addition to that, his body is virtually indestructible. He can use his power on himself should he ever sustain any damage to heal himself instantaneously. He can use it to phase his own body through solid objects. His own body, the Firestorm body, is very, very powerful in and of itself. So this is just a lot of additional powers that the Human Torch doesn't possess. And in addition to all those powers that the Human Torch doesn't come away with, Johnny Storm doesn't have any enhanced durability. Maybe a slight enhanced durability because of his body being on fire. His body is able to tolerate certain energy attacks a little better, but for the most part, he doesn't have very much enhanced durability. On the other hand, Firestorm's body is very, very resistant to damage, and he can use his powers to heal himself should he sustain any damage. He's certainly fireproof, which takes most of Johnny Storm's attacks completely out of the equation. Anything Johnny Storm happens to do to Firestorm, not really going to hurt Firestorm. And ultimately, the additional abilities of molecular rearrangement, plus having the brain of a genius Dr. Martin Stein, is going to give Firestorm much more versatility in the kind of attacks he can use and the kind of powers he can ultimately bring to bear against Johnny Storm. So it's kind of a mismatch here. While they both seem to be fire-based characters, Firestorm has vastly, vastly more powers and more abilities at his disposal than Johnny Storm does. So Firestorm takes that win. And that takes us to the end of this Grudge Match Lightning Round Spectacular. Let me know down below what you think of the outcome of each of these matches, and of course any suggestions for future Grudge matches, either full episodes or Lightning Round run-throughs. We'll see you next time on the next edition of Grudge Match.